Many people love to come up with their characters' backstories, but once in a while, players, especially new players, may need a little more support and orientation to be comfortable with role-playing. Sometimes having a session -1 for a player may be a good option for that. Bray here, and I'll be talking about holding session -1s today. Session zeros are usually the first session a GM has with a group of adventurers to work out the details of who they are and what their motivations are. But maybe you have people new to tabletop RPGs in your group and you want to develop a little more rapport with your players to keep them engaged or invested in who they are as an adventurer. Enter session -1. A session -1 is a meeting with a single player in order to give them more information on role-playing in general and give them a low-stakes environment to both develop their character and relive a formative moment in their character's life, allowing them to bond with their character and be more invested in how they develop. A session 0 isn't meant to focus on everything in its totality, but if you feel the need to talk about the mechanics of the game, that's fine too. Now, there are first-time players that do need that extent of help. Just keep that in mind. The main point of the session -1 is to get players into a role-playing mindset and fan the flames of creativity in a non-real-life environment. After all, retail settings don't normally feature customers trying to immolate you with fireballs or skewer you with arrows. But how do you get a player to participate in this extra session? Sometimes it can be hard to get a new player to really get into role-playing, especially if they feel it's work or that it won't pay off in some way for them. Make sure to offer them some sort of compensation in the form of an item that could be of use or beneficial to them, such as extra healing items, slightly better than basic weapon items, or even a talisman that protects them from death once. It's your job as a GM to make sure you're going to offer something of value to get them to participate in this extra session, if they're not too enthused in the first place. Once they agree, it's time to really dig your hooks into the player. You can start by asking the player about what they like in a fantasy game and what they'd like to play. If they have any questions or want suggestions, give them brief explanations of how classes and races/ancestries work and what are the main features of each aspect and how rolling dice and stats works. The main point here is to lay out all their options and let them window shop until they see something they like. Don't pressure them in anything. If they ask for suggestions, start asking leading questions like, what play style do you have with other people in co-op games? What do you think would be a fun idea or concept to explore during the game? Do you want to fulfill a certain role in your adventuring party? What is a core part of your character? So once you've got an idea of where you think the player wants to go with their character, you can start suggesting things that might best fit them. Like sculpting clay, creating a character starts with the broad strokes, lopping off all the non-possibilities and creating the basic shapes. These basic shapes consist of class and ancestry options. Now, after settling on an ancestry and class, bring up what the adventure will look like. Have them get as granular as possible: height, weight, facial features, hair, clothes, etc., in order to get them invested in their character. They have to have a good idea of what they look like. After all, it's their adventurer who may represent themselves or concept they want to explore for themselves in your game. From here, you can start talking about equipment, spells, skills, and what have you. At this point, you can suggest recommended equipment based on class and things that an adventurer would need to survive in your world. Of course, if there are things that are critical to their character, you should let them add that to their equipment lists. Of course, you don't have to go into as much detail as that at this stage and have them do the character setup themselves as homework. Now comes the fun part, the actual role-playing. Ask your player if there was a formative moment in their character's life that spurred them to start looking for adventure or formed a key part of their personality. It can even relate to their physical appearance if they have something like a visible scar or other feature, if the player permits. If they don't know or are too shy or panicked to think of something, that's fine. You can always give them some hooks with some seemingly random events that you made up that are actually hooks in your game that you might actually explore. explore within the campaign proper when you get the rest of the players together. Always be mindful to keep these in the vein of something fantastical or fantasy based and not anything that could possibly cut into any real life events that they are experiencing. You don't want to break their immersion while you're getting them in character. While you're role playing this moment in your player character's life, don't feel pressured to use clear cut mechanics. Just use a d20 or a d100 to determine success and failure. Mechanics are 100% not a priority at this stage, and rule of cool is in full effect to enact when you see fit. As far as time goes, don't spend more than an hour to an hour and a half on this part max. Ideally, you want to establish the mood for the adventurer's memory and give enough time for your player to make their decisions within it. Afterwards, make sure to ask your player if they were satisfied with this experience. Ask them how they feel about their character. If they've gotten a better understanding of how to roleplay as that character and if they feel comfortable. Remember, they can always change their character's personality and retcon things if they don't feel it's something they can sustain for multiple sessions. Always thank your player for their time and make sure to give them an in-game item to compensate them for participating in this extra optional session with you. In closing, Session Zeros are a very useful tool for getting newer players to pay attention to role-playing aspects of their characters and get invested in their backstory in order to create a more immersive experience for them and everyone else at the table. It's not a very difficult, in-depth thing to hold an extra one-on-one session, but it does involve just a little extra time. Feel free to try this technique and let me know what you think of it in the comments. See you next time, and happy adventuring.